we are here with
back.
That's right, with Mr. Kevin Carney.
Had a little bit of a hiatus, a couple weeks.
Yes, we did, but we got things right back on board, going full speed through the holidays and whatnot. But yeah, so let's introduce Mr. Kevin. How do we do that? So Kevin Carney,
howdy,
here, Beyond Textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go ahead. I don't have a list here, but I know teacher, principal, multiple times, 30 under 30.
Oh, something like that. Yeah. I'm turning 50 tomorrow. It's hard to remember 30 under 30. Right? Yeah, how about that?
Yep, but I do. I remember some of that stuff. And then what else? We have,
gosh. Well, let me back up and let me tell you about my current role. I'm in essence a native Tucson, and I actually was born in Kansas. But with 7 siblings and a brother who was a bad asthmatic, we looked for some drier climate. I remember those days when my mom was calling on the phone, seeking out a place, and I kept thinking, what is this Tucson, Arizona place, right? Anyway, we ended up here when I was in elementary school, went through all local schools, and was a U of A graduate. Where's our camera?
Yep, over there.
Bear down, baby. We're going to defeat the Sun Devils come Saturday, right?
We had a Sun Devil on here.
Yeah. So in any event, I graduated from the U of A. Taught out in Marana for several years, then in the Vail School District for, 4 years. As you mentioned, was a principal at 2 different schools. In fact, that's where I ended up meeting Aaron. I don't know if you know about that, Chase, but his daughter was in my school at the time, and Aaron was a very, very engaged parent, still is, and was involved with our site council, so I got a chance to know Aaron. And then I've been working with our Beyond Textbooks program the past 10 years. In essence, what I do is on behalf of our school district, myself and my team, we work with charter schools and school districts all throughout Arizona, and in several other states as well. All told, we have, 114 partners now, something like 350 schools. There's, 150 students being impacted. And what we simply do is we say, hey, if you think you're missing a systematic approach, because that's one of the keys we think to being successful. In fact, there's 4 things. I've been in hundreds of schools, thousands of classrooms the past 10 years, and the 4 things we say separates the great schools from the good, the mediocre, and the average, and frankly, the poorly performing schools are A, quality leadership, B, a quality teaching staff, C, a systematic approach to how you do your business, and then fourthly, and added to this is we don't care who our clientele is, we expect that they're going to be successful. So what we do is we say we're not here to work on the leadership or the teaching staff or the attitude, we're here to work on that systematic approach, because I don't care if you work in the restaurant industry, if you own a professional, if you're the owner of the Phoenix Suns, or if you do what you guys do. If you don't have systems in place, and I know you're a systems guy, then things don't run as efficiently and you don't get as much success. So that's what we do. We partner with all these different groups. We train, we do about 350 PD sessions a year, training about 10,000 educators a year.
PD sessions?
Professional development sessions.
Okay.
Training educators and then trying to lift their student achievement. We've had some good success with that. Not always, but we've had a couple school districts in Arizona that we've helped ascend to the #1 ranking in the state. In Idaho, we've had the same success, where a school district who had never been in, the closest they'd ever been to #1 was ranked 80th, and after a couple years ago, they were with us. So we've really enjoyed and had some good success there. So that's a little bit about what I do professionally. And then personally, I was married to my wife 29 years and have 3 children. And a couple grandkids too, which is fun also. Yeah, I got a date coming up to go see Wreck-It Ralph. You guys got some Wreck-It Ralph fans in your house? Of course you do, right? In my house too. So anyway, a little bit about me.
And then is what you do, is it collaborative?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not only, Idaho, it's not just you and Vail saying, hey, do this. It's a partnership.
It is a partnership, and I really get excited about that. One of the things we always need, that why, right? That thing that gets us out of the bed in the morning. And as we look at the landscape right now with what's going on across our country and the amount of division that's going on, or even think in our own homes where a lot of people have broken relationships, and I'm not certainly immune to that. There's things that I go through with my own family. The reality is that because of all this devices that's going on, the fact that I get to get out of bed every morning and do things to try to bring people together is really exciting to me and to my team, and we really greatly enjoy it.
So you talk about that why piece or purpose piece. Talk to me a little bit more about that purpose piece, if you don't mind.
Yeah, you bet.
On why that's important.
Yeah, as you know, purpose is so important, and for me, that was really slammed home the past several years. As you know, my wife battled stage 4 lung cancer for 3 years and ended up passing away. But during those 3 years, my purpose had to adjust from one of professional and various other identities I had to my main purpose becoming that as a caregiver to her. And when you have all that time on your hands, because there's not a lot that she could do during that time, you, trust me, spent a lot of time thinking about who you are, what you do, and why that might matter. And so, in thinking of that, I just think it's so critical that we examine purpose all the time as people, because purpose is, as I said earlier, it's what gets us excited to get out of bed in the morning or not, right?
Yeah.
Purpose is what also ends up defining who we are, and ultimately it defines our legacy. Conversely, without purpose, and I've been in situations, even now at this age, where I don't have the right purpose in certain situations, what happens is you can't be as effective, you get into ruts, you end up not being the best you that you can be, whether health-wise, physically or emotionally or even spiritually.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you might lead a life of regret if you look back and say, hey, how come I didn't this or how come I didn't that? And by and large, I think people can tie those things back to a lack of purpose at certain times that help to drive them get out of bed and pursue what they like.
We were just talking about that this morning. I was talking to the team about even just myself I'm in this little funk. Like, okay, what is going on here? But I think being able to identify it, and I know that you and I talked about this a while back. Didn't you have was it 3 Ps in the process that you identify? There was a systematic approach.
I just think purpose is a part of a larger equation, if you will, a formula. I mentioned earlier, I've been in all these hundreds of schools, trained thousands of teachers, and for me, what I've learned during that time is 4 things. There's 4 things part of an equation that help lead to greater success. One is you got to have a purpose that says, hey, what is exactly I'm trying to do? 2, you got to have humility. And in fact, Confucius says humility is the greatest of all, or the most important of all morals. And I'll speak a little bit more to that. 3, you got to want to come together with others, because you can't accomplish things just on your own. In fact, there's a saying that if you're not dreaming, your dream doesn't involve others, then your dream probably isn't big enough, and I believe that to be true.
Yeah.
So I think if you have purpose, you have humility, you work with others, then what I've seen over the course of time is that just leads to greater success overall. If I were to plot my life and see times where I haven't been as successful, almost invariably I can look back and say, you know what, I didn't have the proper purpose, or I didn't have the proper humility, or I tried to go about it on my own. In fact, if you were to chart the mistakes that I've ever made as a leader, I bet predominantly, and I made a lot of mistakes, you would find that those mistakes were done when I worked in isolation versus involving others as well.
Something that I think you nailed is that you can see people oftentimes that have extreme amount of purpose and they're extremely driven, and then slowly they lose the humility side.
Yes.
And then they just become purposeful but also arrogant.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's
I think that can be toxic.
Oh, for sure. And it's a slow fade. It doesn't happen overnight.
Oh yeah, and I think the other thing that does is this. I think when you have success, it's also a result of hard work, expertise, but also good fortune. And when you have that piece there where there's humility that's lacking, then I think you tempt the gods, so to speak, of good fortune, because I think, as we all know, we get what we give in, right? And if we're not being humble, then life finds its way of showing us we need to be more humble, right?
Yeah.
And so I agree with that. I think it's a huge part of that. And we all lose humility from time to time, right? You guys go through those periods, and I do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can be humble or get humble.
Yeah,
One of the two.
yeah. It's a challenge, because we know there are many enemies of humility. There's ego, there's frustration, there's anger, there's all sorts of things, right? So I think that's why when you have that clear objective and that clear purpose that you're trying to accomplish, without that, it's always hard to say, well, if I am lost somewhere out there on the road of humility and I want to get back home, if you don't have an end destination, it's going to be really hard to get back there. So that's why I think they all work in conjunction with each other to lead to that greater success ultimately.
So what is it about education? So we've talked about this is you taught my wife's little brother out in Marana. Go out to Marana, then drive 5 more miles Marana.
Yeah, I know. That's what they told me when I had the interview. They said, keep driving when you think you're lost, keep going.
Yeah, exactly. And I tried to explain to them about when Jenny and I were dating. I was living in Oro Valley, pastoring in Green Valley, and I'd go see Jenny out by their house by Roadrunner, and
yes,
Marana. I was like, that was an hour drive from Green Valley.
Oh, I'm surprised it was only an hour. Yeah, it's a jaunt out there.
Starting there, or going there, and then now you are educating other teachers, administrative staff now. Yeah. What is about education that gets you pumped up every day?
Well, I've been so fortunate. As I think about education, it has done so much for my life. And I'll back up even further. My mom is my hero. My mom was a single mom who raised 7 kids. And growing up, my dad was a terrific guy, but things didn't work out between them. And as a result, my mom and dad ended up splitting when I was 8. And from the time I was 8 to when my dad passed away when I was 28 or 29, I only saw my dad on several occasions. Only talked to him by phone a couple of times. And so what occurs then when that happens, when you have a parent that's not engaged in your life, you end up feeling abandoned, is the truth of the matter, right? And you seek ways and you seek people that will acknowledge you and make you feel a part of something, right? Yeah. Well, the first place that I got that, other than from my mom, was at school. At school, I was always fortunate to have teachers who said, hey, you know what? Even when I didn't do what I was supposed to be doing, I love you. I don't like what you're doing right now, but I love you, and you matter, and you're important. And that was just really critical in my life growing up, because that feeling of abandonment from my father. And so as I thought about what did I want to do once the time came, to me, I just saw so much value in what had happened to me that I thought, if I can make a difference in some other kid's life, like the difference that was made in my life, that would be huge. And so that's why I started teaching. Now from there, I really enjoyed teaching, but when opportunities came to become a building administrator and then do what I do now, it was really a tough decision to walk away from the classroom, but I realized within the classroom I can only impact 30 kids a year. But in these other roles, I could potentially, even indirectly, impact hundreds in the cases as an administrator, and now literally hundreds of thousands in the role of beyond textbooks. So I really enjoy that. Awesome. And I just think, one of the things I admire the most about Aaron is that he intentionally seeks ways to bring value to other people with nothing in return, by the way. And I aspire to be like that. And that's the other thing I get from education, is that feeling of bringing value to others. And I think that's one of the neat things, is when you do work to bring value to others, 2 things happen. One is you uplift them, but the truth of the matter is you get uplifted as well. So admittedly, over the course of time, although I altruistically did it to help people, and I still do, there is a little bit of probably the wrong word, but maybe it is the right word, selfish piece to say, hey, this is a great way to make me feel good about who I am and what I'm trying to accomplish in life.
We were just talking about that too. I was like, this morning.
We've got when we bring new agents on, we've got a mentoring, shadowing piece where they are, for lack of a better term, we say it's time to sit down and shut up. Like they just listen. And what's cool about that is right now we've got Juliana and Javier.
Javier.
Oh yeah, former student. Yeah.
So Javier,
he's a big fan of yours. He was kind of disappointed he had to leave to go.
Yeah. Hey, high five, Javier. We wish you were here, my friend.
Javi is coaching and a mentor for a new agent in the industry who is attached to his hip. And we were having this conversation with Javi and Juliana last week, it is forcing me to be on my game, and it's forcing me to grow in order to teach them. And like you were saying, is that there's so much joy in that, and I believe that, especially like where you're at, is you're constantly educating other educators.
Yes.
Where like you have to level up consistently.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It also helps you out as well.
In 2 ways. One is, or 3 ways actually. One is in that value that I mentioned of trying to bring value to others. But 2, that piece you referenced a little bit there. The fact that they're being a little bit uncomfortable. My mom always used to tell me, if you're not a little uncomfortable, you're probably not growing as a person, right? So that's that piece, is it makes you a little bit uncomfortable, which is great and it's positive. But thirdly, it's that piece of, hey, I can learn a lot from this too. Absolutely. But going back to that comfort piece, I don't know why this just came in my mind, but it did. I don't know if you're familiar with Pastor T.D. Jakes. Yep. I got a chance to see him speak on many occasions, and one of the things that he has, and many of them, but for the purpose of this, he talks about when we're petrified, we're electrified. And when Javi talks about being a little uncomfortable, what he's saying is, I'm petrified. But as you said, that makes him electrified to say, I better be on my game to make sure I'm taking care of these people appropriately.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you want to grow, teach.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You'll learn a lot more too.
You learn a lot about yourself.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, in fact, sometimes it's not the students that are learning; it's me that's learning
right.
from my own.
Yeah,
my own
I think
mistakes.
that's. I will say this: I think I've read and listened to more books in the last year than I have my entire life.
Oh, wow!
And I just that's my passion. Just learn more and more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think the application part is the key to it as well. You know,
Sure.
that's most important.
So much with learning is what we talk about is R&D, rip off and duplicate.
Yes.
Because
Take action on it
and do it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't always have to be the guy that comes up with the most unique, creative thing that happened and nobody else did it. A lot of the times, just reading, implementing, and then putting that information out there.
Absolutely, I love that thought too, because I think that so many leaders feel like they have to be all-knowing and have the answers to everything.
Original.
And yes, and so they end up with paralysis by analysis.
Absolutely.
I got to come up with the greatest thing because I can't, that I'm paralyzed. Instead, it's very simple. It's the idea. It's the Henry Ford principle, right? I'm going to make a basic model car, and then I'm going to do the same process over and over and over and over, right? It's not rocket science. It's actually doing the little things correct.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Micro level turns into macro.
Yeah.
So you had, I remember during your wife's ceremony that you had mentioned something about life focals.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, kind of explain what that is, because I know that had an impact on quite a few of us.
Oh, well,
And I think
you.
that we learned so much during that process, but more importantly, I think that after the fact, it still resonates with myself.
Thank
So
you.
if you can kind of elaborate a little bit on that.
You bet. Again, just going back to that, we all know what's important in life, but the reality is that life moves so quickly that we forget, right? And so as a result, because we lose focus, we worry about things that are unimportant, such as titles and salary. And don't get me wrong, you got to be able to pay the bills, right? And be able to enjoy life. But we worry about the wrong things. Who's not putting their coffee cup away? Silly things like that, right? But again, during that time where Jamie was sick and death was inevitable. In fact, we had a psychologist ask us at one time. They said, she's going to die, right? So how do you live with hope knowing she's going to die was the question. That was a pretty staggering question, right? In fact, we were a little offended by it at first. But the more we thought about it, we were so glad that he asked that question, because what we did is we realized we had to redefine hope. And a part of that is putting on those life focals. Because that's the thing is, one good thing that comes with cancer is you get instant clarity. If you can imagine driving down the road in San Francisco, for example, where they have a lot of fog, and there's a lot of dew points right in the morning, and sometimes your windows get all fogged up. Well, when you put on that the decompressor there, or the thing that takes the humidity away, how it just goes away, that effect. Well, it's the same thing with cancer. Once that happens, there's a fog that gets lifted to where you once again see as clearly as possible what are the things that are most important through what I call life focals. Bifocals, they help us to see near and far, perhaps, if you will. But life focals, what they allow us to do is they allow us to see what's truly important in life, and then be able to act upon what's truly important in life. And equally important, non-act upon the things that aren't as important in life that maybe we're spinning our wheels at and giving too much attention to. But that being said, that's a lesson that has to constantly be relearned. Even as she approaches the 1-year anniversary of her passing, I still have daily moments where I focus on things that aren't important, or I get all wrapped around the axle, or I find my, the boiling point going up, when realize that if I just take a step back, this is not as important as I think. What's way more important is human interaction and telling each other we care for each other and doing right by your fellow person and being a good model for your kids and having a spiritual side to you as well. And you can go on down the line, right? And I just think life focals are great because they help you to remember those things that we constantly lose sight of that are the real deal important versus the pseudo things that we think are important, but they're truly not.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I always get something out of that. I mean, that is just, it's very powerful to me because I think we're moving so fast in life right now. Yeah. Instant gratification, everything's got to be here and there. And even, and I think we put a lot of people aside to get what, things that we want, you're right. And before you know it, you look back, and I think that can build to a lot of regret.
Sure.
You know,
we've had that conversation a lot. We especially right there's, and I don't know how much you see this stuff, but there's this culture of not hard work, but hustle,
the grind.
If
Oh,
you're
yeah.
if you're not working 400 hours a week, if you're not working 25 hours a day, you
Yeah.
suck at life and you're never going to succeed and stuff. And
So I'm not the only one with that guilt? Okay, all right.
but I look at that stuff and I go, like my grandma just passed away. Her husband passed away. They're in their 90s. Towards the later years in her life, they didn't talk once about their promotions or how many jobs they had or anything like that. None of that stuff mattered.
Yeah.
It was purely about people, the kids, the grandkids, the life, the legacy. You know, it's and conversely, almost all the regrets people have later on in life is the missed opportunities they had with people.
Yes.
Not
That's right.
necessarily a paycheck.
Yes. Yeah.
Nobody at their deathbed goes, man, I really wish I would have taken that investment. Like, you know, nobody talks about that. They talk about relationships and people.
Yeah. And we're all hard workers, right?
Yeah.
The three of us were drivers, and we're workaholics. I have no doubt that we've all been out of balance with that, right?
Absolutely.
One of the sayings that I love that I see in our school district constantly is people before paperwork. And it's so simplistic, but yet it's so profound because it speaks to what we're speaking to right now, which is the fact that, hey, at the end of the day, yeah, I want to bang these contracts out so that I can hurry up and get down and be home with my family and be actually home with them. But the reality is sometimes we need to put that paperwork aside and deal with the people in our life.
So we have a saying just like that, but in Keller Williams, it's people before profits.
Yeah, love that.
You know?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the thing I love best about that with you guys is it's one thing to have a saying, but you emulate that. I tell people all the time when I recommend them to you is that what you're going to realize in working with these guys is they are altruistically in it to get what's possibly best for you. And yes, they have a bottom line. So let's not pretend here. But you're not going to feel as though you're in a transactional mode at all. You're going to feel like you're in a relationship mode where somebody was looking out for your best interests and just wanted to do right by you.
I thank you
So
for
kudos to
mentioning
you guys
that.
for
Thank
that.
you. I think that's the thing is it's listening to everybody individually, and it's also, you know, it's the culture. We want what's best for them. Period. You know, and I think if we live our life that way, I mean, we have our, you know, trust, honesty, respect, integrity, loyalty, and of course laughter, but that's our work ethic, and that's actually the way we live our life at home too. And you know, and I think that's a huge piece of the success. It's transparent.
Oh, I agree.
You know?
And so going back to that formula,
Yeah.
then going back to that, when you say those characteristics there, to me, you're saying this is what my purpose is.
That's right.
And the fact that you talked about that's what leads to success, well, I would still go back to those things in between. You're not doing these things in isolation, you're doing them with other people. And the thing that I love about it is, again, the humble attitude that you guys bring to this, the servant attitude, if you will, that is just really attractive and just something I really appreciate about your group.
Well, thank you.
So someone that's listening, besides your dad and my mom,
Maybe his mom for the
Carter.
first.
Well, I got to get her to make
First
sure
10
she
to
can get on
15
there.
minutes, yeah.
But she would
so,
listen. Yeah.
So,
if someone's listening to this and they're struggling with purpose, you know, and statistics prove it. I forgot the statistic, but it's like 90% of people hate their jobs.
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, and a lot of people feel like their identity is their job.
Yeah.
I've been there, and if someone's struggling with trying to find purpose, and they feel like their purpose is to work a job they hate, pay the IRS, barely make it, and then die, like how does somebody begin to initiate finding purpose?
Well, one thing I believe is anytime you have a problem, one of the greatest strategies to problem solving is to break a problem down into smaller problems, right? Into smaller pieces. And so I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this as well, we think we want this, but then we go, it's too big of a hurdle. And when people are struggling with lack of purpose, they tend to equate a lack of purpose in all areas of their life. Okay. So the first thing I would say to them is, you know what, break down your identities, right? We have identities in life, right? I have an identity as a husband, a father, a son, a brother, a sister, a friend, right? But then I also have an identity as professional, and I have an identity, a spiritual identity, etc., right? Yep. So I think from there, once you break it down, then it becomes easier to see, okay, actually, where are the places where I do have good purpose in life? And oh, by the way, let's celebrate that. So I don't feel as bad about myself.
So I hear
and
you
where are
say-
the places I don't have the purpose?
So what I hear you saying is there might be a lot of times where people think they have no purpose because one small part is out of whack.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that, right, it's when you have a toothache,
Yeah.
your whole body's healthy besides your tooth. That's the only thing you're focusing on.
Uh-huh, yeah.
So
yeah.
they may have purpose, they just may be out of whack in one area.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. That's wise.
You know, another thing I would say with regard to that is that involve others. Two heads are better than one. Many hands make for light of work. So I say involve others in the conversation of saying, hey, this is how I see myself, and this is where I'd like to be. What suggestions do you have? Or for people who you think are real difference makers, people who they just make things happen, being vulnerable, having that humility that I mentioned earlier to say, what do you think I need? And can you help me get there? I think is another important question to ask. And then the other thing I would share is along the way as you start to implement, a good idea poorly implemented becomes a bad idea. A good idea well implemented becomes a great idea, right? So going back to implementation, I would just go back to the piece of, I think it's also important to celebrate the small milestones. I referenced earlier that when that doctor said to us, how do you live with hope knowing she's going to die? We had to redefine hope and make it intermittent hope. So no longer was the hope going to be that we hope that she lives, because that was out the window, right? That just wasn't going to happen. So instead we had hope like, I hope today that for an hour she doesn't feel sick after chemo. I hope today that when the kids are home for dinner that she has enough strength to get out of bed and come to the table and have conversation and not get sick from the food, right? Yeah. And then from there we could say, instead of getting all wrapped around the axle about this ultimate victory of living, no, we could celebrate victories on an hourly basis potentially, right? So as people start to then put things into play, I think it's incredibly important to do in the education biz what we call formative assessments, which is checking in on a frequent basis to say, how am I doing? And then monitoring and adjusting appropriately and celebrating those victories. Because once we celebrate those victories, that oftentimes gives us the motivation to say, hey, I'm going to keep going.
Yep.
That's awesome.
What would you guys do? I mean, those are a couple thoughts for myself.
No,
What would
I
you say?
absolutely love that. I love the way that you talk. It's just the micro pieces, again, that add up to the big piece. And I think that's what we come across a lot of people. They struggle with that, and we call it the big why.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think there's also maybe not one big why, but there's a bunch of different ones, and they can throw them together. You know, so
I come from the might have thought that there's something inherently special about a big why or purpose where others are benefited.
Yes.
And it's not just selfish.
Yes.
You know,
correct.
like we've talked about it a million times. One of my big whys is building homes in Mexico, and that's multifaceted, right? Like we were talking about with helping out others is we leave Mexico and someone's got a house. Really, I feel better than they do. I think.
Yeah.
Because,
right.
But what it does, but it helps them out. Helps leave a legacy for my kids. You know that type of stuff. I think that there's something with purpose where it's not 100% self-indulging.
Yes.
There's so much, like you cannot put a dollar amount on the feeling that you get when you help somebody.
I'll even elaborate on that. I know you had mentioned it before, and it's kind of stuck with me as well. You know, like, you know what, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, you know, your daughter's able to drive down through a certain area and go, my dad helped people that are here, and just continuous. You know, and that's more impactful than, I'm sorry, for what a dollar amount that's in a checkbook somewhere.
Absolutely.
You know, or whatever.
And the one thing I know from I've had when my wife was teaching kindergarten and I was a pastor, and we wish we could get to the level of broke. Like we could have got to broke, that would have been awesome. And
I can just see you right now. There's an image. We made it to broke.
Yeah. We have to pay taxes this year.
Yeah. I remember those days as well.
But and gone the opposite direction. We're made very good income, and the one thing I've realized about money is money, and money's.
And it comes and goes, by the way.
It's fleeting.
Yes.
But memories, like we bought both of our daughters to Mexico back in April, and they will have that for the rest of their life. Nobody can buy that from them. Nobody can take it.
I've learned money buys memories if you put it in the right direction. In other words, travel, trips, you know, vacations of that nature. And it doesn't have to go, you don't have to go somewhere. It's just blocking out the time, because it's either you're going to be working or you're going to take the time off. So it's the time. Yeah. It's the time aspect of it, you know.
You know, this other jogs my memory is you guys are familiar with John Maxwell, right?
Of course.
Right. So when you were talking earlier about sometimes when people have their why, it's not for the right reasons, it's for selfish reasons. And it made me think of something that he talks about oftentimes, which is that so many people want to make, not so many people, everyone, let's face it, wants to say, I made a difference in life, right?
Yeah.
We all want to make a difference. And some people have grand visions. I want to be a rock star. I want to be the president of the United States. I want to own this. I want to do that, right? When truly, the way to make a difference isn't to be a rock star or to be a professional baseball player. I mean, that'll be fun, right?
Yeah.
But the way to make a difference is to say to yourself on a daily basis, I want to bring value to others.
Absolutely.
I want to impact their life, and then act upon that. And slowly but surely, as you guys know, what happens is by making a difference in people's lives, all of a sudden you become a difference maker, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that my kids, that was really neat for them to see, is that for my wife's funeral, being a former teacher, she had a ton of folks show up. There were over 700 people in the church. And I took time to make sure I pointed out to them, why do you think these people showed up? Oh, a lot of people know you and Mom. No, that's not why they showed up. The reason they showed up is because your mom has devoted her life to making a difference in the lives of others. And she did that. And they're here to reciprocate that and show the respect for her work to try to bring value to others.
To acknowledge the value she gave.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
I'd like to kind of wrap this up kind of full circle here. That brought back a very vivid memory that I'm sure you remember, and I know Jamie remembered as well. It was literally right after the diagnosis. It was about a month after you and I were talking, and I think a lot of people don't know how to help out in certain situations. And I remember talking to you about going, okay, you know, what is there? Is there something you could do? A lot of people brought, you know, food and all kinds of stuff. And I remember you had mentioned, you know, decorating the house would be kind of cool, because I don't really have time to do that for Christmas.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that I'm like, all right, cool. So of course I reached out to some of the powers that be there in the Vail School District, and they flooded that house, did we not?
Yeah.
And it was just a wonderful thing for everybody involved, and that was a win-win situation. It
was huge.
That still warms my heart today.
And mine too. We had 125 people out at this little house in a little, subdivision, and by the way, we're so out of bad things come good things. We had so many people that were so gracious to our family. And it's difficult to say, hey, this event was more important or more meaningful than this.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, having 125 people show up, the timing of it being just been a month since then, was huge. And I'll never forget my reaction to my son, who's 14. And at the time, he was 10. He went to school the next day, and a teacher who had participated said, hey, tell me about your house. And he said, well, you know how in every neighborhood there's that one house that's just so many lights? And he very proudly at 10 years old said, this year, that's our house. That's awesome. And to me, what you did there, Aaron, is you not only brought value to our family, but the other thing you did is you gave us something to look forward to. And anybody who's in a tough situation, one of the number one things I think they need something to look forward to, right? Mm-hmm. So what you gave us is, whenever we were coming home that month, something to look forward to come home and say, wow, we're in a bad mood, but when we get home, we're going to see this spectacular light show. And, to the viewers or to yourselves, that may not seem like a big deal, but I'm telling you, it was a big deal to us. And I think
well, like I said, I don't take credit for it. It was the community that came together.
Yeah.
So we, and nobody really knew how and what, but I think that they knew right then and there that was a big token.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I was actually going through some of the photos the other day, and I kind of got a little choked up, because I was like, that was really cool to see that community come together like that.
Yeah, it was neat, but the bad news is I felt the pressure sense to make sure that house is just like that. In fact, I'm thinking I got to start plugging in lights right now.
You had to go through. You were blowing some circuit breakers and whatnot. The Griswold.
But it was a good problem to have, though. It's a good problem to have. Yeah.
Well, good. Anything else that you want to comment on?
I just want to say thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Not only just for the time here today. Thank you, by the way, for anybody who might be tuning in. But just thank you for what you do for our community. I know from working closely with you as a friend, as a professional, some of the things you do. But I have no doubt there's so many things that you guys do that are unseen, that are for just the betterment of others. I really admire you. I think that saying that we tell our own kids, you are who you surround yourself with.
Oh, absolutely.
I aspire to be around people like yourselves, because when I'm around people like yourselves, it's a good chance to look in that mirror and say, hey, am I doing what they're doing? And if not, how can I do better and make myself better and get to the level where they're at with the types of things that you're contributing to people, the type of purpose you have. So I just appreciate the model that you guys have. You guys are role models for me in that way, and so are some of my other friends. So I just greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And we love what you're doing for the community.
Thank you.
Doing big things, so thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
All right. Anything?
It's good. Appreciate the time, man.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
bet. My pleasure. One more go U of A Wildcats.
That's
Bear
right.
down, baby.
All right.
See you guys.
Later.